So, welcome back everyone to week 8. I hope you've had an enjoyable mid semester break and you've managed to get on top of a few things in that time. Really nice not having to listen to lectures, come in for lectures, and that sort of thing. So, hopefully, you're nice and renewed for week 8. So, what we're going to be looking at today in this lecture is part 1, academic integrity and plagiarism. So, basically, what that means is we're looking at when a student takes someone else's work and passes them off as their own. So, that's what those sorts of words and phrases mean. Part 2, we're going to be looking at referencing, so in-text citations. And part 3, we're going to be looking at another one of our 10-minute grammar points at the end of the lecture. Okay, first though, this is just a bit of a quick activity to spot the error. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of time to look at that. So basically this is to indicate that there's an apostrophe missing in the don't. So let's move on to part 1, academic integrity and plagiarism. So what does this mean? So according to UTAS, academic integrity is about mastering the art of scholarship. Scholarship involves researching, understanding, and building upon the work of others and requires that you give credit where it is due and acknowledge the contribution of others to your own intellectual efforts. At its core, academic integrity requires honesty. This involves being responsible for ethical scholarship and for knowing what academic dishonesty is and how to avoid it. So, the important point to take from this particular quote is that scholarship involves researching, understanding, and building upon the work of others. So it's completely understandable that you will go and read what already exists in terms of research in order to figure out where you stand on particular issues. That's not a problem. Um, if you look at the second paragraph of this quote, really it's just about ethical scholarship and basically stating very clearly when you've taken work from someone else. So we expect that you'll be building on the work of others, but you just need to be acknowledging where that work has come from. So, what does this mean, and what are some possible examples? So, academic dishonesty, according to UTAS, is using words, ideas, computer code, or any work by someone else without giving proper credit, and that's classed as academic dishonesty. So, academic dishonesty is often referred to as plagiarism. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be words, it could be ideas, it can be computer code. It's basically if you take some kind of intellectual property from someone else and you pass it off as your own. So, according to UTAS, plagiarism is a form of cheating. It is taking and using someone else's thoughts, writings, or inventions and representing them as your own. For example, using an author's words without putting them in quotation marks and citing the source, using an author's ideas without proper acknowledgement and citation, and copying another student's work. So, plagiarism is basically ripping off someone else's work as your own. So this is another definition that's provided by UNSW. So plagiarism is using the words or ideas of others and presenting them as your own. Plagiarism is a type of intellectual theft. It can take many forms, from deliberate cheating to accidentally copying from a source without acknowledgement. Okay, so this is something that distance students can have a go at doing on discussion boards. So discuss in small groups some possible examples of plagiarism. So have a think about what some examples of plagiarism might be. Maybe you've seen some in the past. If you can maybe talk about some of those examples, I think that would be a useful exercise. So if you can go ahead and do that on discussion boards, that would be really good. And also check your thoughts against page 1 of the handout on plagiarism as well, which might be useful for you. Okay, so when and or why might students plagiarize? This is another thing that's useful to talk about on discussion boards for distance students. Maybe take a few moments to think about the question above. I know as academics, we think about this question quite a lot, particularly when we have issues of plagiarism to deal with. When and why might students plagiarize is a really important point. Okay, so here are some thoughts that we've come up with, but you might have other thoughts and more detailed thoughts around this. So, students may plagiarize intentionally, students may plagiarize unintentionally. Both things can happen. So, often when we are dealing with issues of plagiarism, we try to figure out what's gone on in terms of their intention, but there also might be cultural reasons why students have plagiarized. So these are all things that are worth exploring. So symptoms of plagiarism, there are a number to go through. I'm not going to read through them all, but this is certainly useful to look through. Um, I think that there might be reasons that you've across in the past here. So students are disorganized, students are too lazy to create their own work, but there might also be language barriers there. They might there might be a lack of consequences if they're actually caught, or there might be a low chance of them being caught. And they might have seen other students do that. So, really useful to just press pause here and have a read through some of these and perhaps even incorporate those into your discussion board sort of talks there. So, what happens if you plagiarize at university? So, the intentional copying of someone else's work as one's own is a serious offence punishable by penalties that may range from a fine or deduction or cancellation of marks, and in the most serious of cases, exclusion from a unit, a course, or the university. So, certainly, as I've had a couple of cases of plagiarism, issues of academic integrity, typically, I speak to that student first, so I'll arrange a meeting with that student to talk over why, this material is so close to, well, in fact, identical to someone else's, and go from there. But often in those sorts of cases, it will be a case of giving that student zero on the first offence. But then there are more serious cases if the student repeatedly does that, where we can actually exclude them from a unit or a course or the university. So, how to avoid plagiarism? So, this is another thing that you can talk about on discussion boards. So, how do you actually avoid that? You may already have some strategies that you've used in the past that have been successful, but this is a good opportunity to talk about those in more detail. So, for more information on academic integrity, you can go to these sources of information. You can go to, either of those are fine. Remember that when you submit an assessment through Turnitin, we get a very detailed report on where you've taken information from. So, even if a student has taken information from their own previous assignment from a previous semester or another student's assignment, Turnitin will track it for us and actually gives us a very detailed report of where information is from. So whether or not you've got it from a book in the library, from the internet, um, from any source, that program will basically give us the source and enable us to sort of track where everything is from. Zombies and plagiarism. So this is something to watch in your own time. So if you'd like to have a look at this, it's basically making the same point about plagiarism in a light-hearted kind of way. So if you'd like to go ahead and watch this, that would be great. So, part two, referencing and doing in text citation. So, the reason that this part of the lecture is here is because we've talked about academic integrity and plagiarism. This is how to avoid it. This is why we do referencing, to acknowledge someone else's work. So, what do we know so far? Um, if we can do a bit of a recap, so what is it? Why do we do it? When do we do it? How do we do it? And what is Harvard style? This is stuff we covered in the week 7 lecture. But it would be really useful to press pause here as well and to just recap on what the answers to these questions are. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, so the Harvard referencing style um, requires three key parts of information for in-text referencing. So that's when you put a quote in or an idea of some kind and you put the reference in brackets after it. So number one, you need the surname of the author. Number two, you need the year of publication. And number three, you need the page number that you found the information on. So those are the three really key parts of referencing. So here's an example for you. So the title, the quote here. So thinking of a storm, thousands of drops of rain all coming down together. The authors, so if I go back to the previous page, we're after the surname here. So we've got the surname of the authors here. Then the previous thing we need is the next thing we need is the year of publication. So the year is 2003. And then the page number is number 6 for this one. One thing I'll point out to you as well is that the placement of commas and full stops is really important. It seems like a small thing, but if you get these wrong, then someone will take them as incorrect. So make sure you get the spelling of the author's name right. Remember that there is no comma between the author and the year, but there is a comma after the year, and there's a full stop after the P because it indicates page number. Here's another example. So the practice of brainstorming can be compared to a heavy storm with lots of raindrops pouring down. So you'll notice that this isn't a quote, but it's an idea that's taken from someone else. So this is being acknowledged in terms of academic plagiarism. In terms of referencing to avoid academic plagiarism. So it's the same technique that's being used. So this is another example. So these authors compare the practice of brainstorming to a heavy storm. So this is the same practice basically, but you'll notice because the names of the authors are actually part of the sentence, we don't need to repeat those. So there's just the year and the page number that's used after them. So this is an activity for you to go through. Again, I would like distance students and people listening to this lecture from home to press pause here and to actually go through and correct these mistakes. This is a really useful activity to try and consolidate some of these ideas that we're talking about. So these are the answers. If you have a look at this, you can see the corrections made in red. And again, I would encourage you to press pause and to think about the placement of all of these pieces of punctuation. And our 10-minute grammar point. Okay, let's look at complete sentences. So this is a really common issue that I get when I'm marking essays. Let's look at whether or not the sentences are complete. So the advice that I would give to you guys, I've worked with a few of my own students on this issue of complete sentences and students not understanding the difference between a full stop and a comma. What I would always suggest you do is read the sentence out loud. If you're at the editing stage of your essay, take the time to read your work out loud and you'll quickly be able to identify where the incomplete sentences are because they'll sound a little bit odd to you. The students of mine and maybe of other tutors, if you see the word written, the phrase written expression on your work, it will also allow you to identify where those awkward areas of written expression are if you read the sentence aloud to yourself. So if you can go through these sentences, so for instance, with number one, analyzing the question, researching the information, outlining and writing the structure, referencing, editing, and drafting it. So that's an incomplete sentence. There needs to be something else after that. And you can hear it in the way it almost stops halfway through. So, distance students, this is a really important thing for you to be working on as well. So, I think this should be something that you write out and talk to Fiona, your distance tutor, about. Go through each of these. Make sure that you're very clear about complete and incomplete sentences, because writing incomplete sentences is really the foundation stones of what you're doing in your writing. Okay, so what are your independent learning tasks for this week? So go over your notes from today. Make sure you know the difference between a complete and incomplete sentence. That's really important. Have a chat on discussion boards about that. Look at Turnitin and Academic Honesty module on Milo. That would be really good too. Um, think about, that concept of academic integrity, and work through the second part of the in-text referencing handout as well. Reminders to bring, excuse me, the Harvard referencing guide from UNSW to the week 9 tutorials, the guide you were given in class today. And as per the units outline, there are no classes in week 12. So it's a chance to work on your final essay when we get down to that point. And this is the video that you can watch. So if you just go to YouTube, that's another sort of example of this concept of plagiarism that you can look at. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for listening. So have a think about academic integrity. Well done on getting your essays in. If you haven't done so, then please get those in ASAP, because you lose 5% for every day that you don't have it in. And we can't mark it after 5 days. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a great week.